Welcome to this community learning opportunity. Today, we're going to talk about harnessing our ancestors' warrior nature in order to manage stress. And it's about staying safe in these modern times. So humans were built to bounce back from adversity, setbacks, and trauma. But we just need to learn how to adjust those responses to today's modern challenges, which are very different than the challenges that we experienced as we were building up through our evolutionary history tens of thousands of years ago. So being able to recognize and understand our own automatic responses and how our brain works and how that works in conjunction with our body is really kind of an evolutionary next step for us. So again, welcome. We are Bounce Back Generation, a nonprofit building and sharing tools to help us all become more resilient to today's stressors and challenges. Our information is gained from our own community experiences and some of the latest research into our brain-body connection and how trauma and toxic stress affect us. You can learn more about our community of resilience builders by visiting bbgtv.org. And if you'd like to know more, we will provide sources and resources at the end of this presentation. So again, I'm Jennifer. I'm the director for Bounce Back Generation, and I'm the facilitator for today. And Shankel is our co-facilitator. I hope that you have a pen and paper, something to write with handy, because towards the end, you're going to be able to take some notes on some strategies that you can use for yourself personally. And as always, share your thoughts in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube, on the comments. Please be respectful and kind to yourself and to others. We appreciate that. What we will learn is how our brain evolved, and then how those evolutionary patterns drive our behaviors today. Even though our challenges are very different, our behaviors are very similar to the way that things were as we were evolving. And then why relationships are the centerpiece of our ability to become more resilient. All right, let's get started. Did you catch that? So if you saw a baseball barreling towards your face, what would you do first? Would you stop and kind of calculate how long the ball would take to reach you? No. Would you start to think about what you did the last time a ball headed towards your nose? I don't know, maybe, but probably not. What you're more likely to do is flinch, blink, get out of the way, do something that you didn't have to think about. You would do something that was an automatic response, right? And that's how we evolved. The first part of our brain to evolve is concerned with automatic functions like breathing and circulation and digestion and those kinds of things. And they're also concerned, it's also concerned with the fight, flight, or freeze response. And these are things that we don't think about, they just happen. There are things that our bodies just and our brains just react to when something externally is coming at it, right? The next part of our brain that evolved is what we call the feeling brain, which is kind of there in that red section. It's concerned with emotions and memories and connecting the emotions and memories together. Like, oh, last time someone threw a ball at my face, that's what happened, so I better get out of the way. If that's something you thought about, it helps us develop habits, attachments to people, things. So it's kind of the next part of our brain to evolve. And please note, our brains are very complex. These are simple examples just to help us to kind of understand the general view of how our brain evolved. And then finally, we have what we call the thinking brain, which is, you'll often hear the executive functioning part of our brain. It's the part that is concerned with problem solving. It sets goals. It kind of thinks through things through many steps and is quite aware of what's going on, you know, kind of thinking, felt that, I thought that. That's that part of our brain. You might have seen other ways of characterizing the brain. There's the action part of the brain, which is also called, which we just talked about, which is also called the reptilian brain. It's first to evolve, fast, automatic bodily functions. The feeling brain is sometimes called the mammalian brain, second to evolve, connects our emotions and our relationships. And then finally, the thinking brain, which is also called the Homo sapien brain, which we are all Homo sapiens, all of us on this planet who are human beings. And it's the most recent evolutionary change, and it's where we are today. It's a thinking and problem solving part of our brains. Now, none of the parts of our brains is better than the other. They're just different ways in which we process information. So the action brain gives us these automatic responses to go into fight or flight mode or freeze, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But freeze mode is when you feel like you can't move or respond. And what happens in our bodies when we go into fight, flight, or freeze is our heart will race, our muscles will be primed to kind of leap into action, our minds will get focused, stomach stops digesting to fight or flee. Then we get into the feeling brain and how does it process information. And we use our feeling brain to inspire us, or we create memories of things. So maybe that guy who, used the spear to go after the lion, now he's going into the cave to create something to memorize, what happened. And that was where I, took the spear and this and that happened. And we tell stories about the experience. So kind of evolutionarily, remember the first thing that would develop would be our automatic response. And then we would layer on top of that our feeling brain with our memories and our, connection between things that happened to us and how we reacted or how others reacted. And then the next part, the final part, is the one that we have now, this part of our brain that is this highly developed thinking brain. And in our, ancient ancestors were developing tools and coming up with ways to deal with the fact that there were lions prowling around them, or that they needed to get food, and eventually started to, farm the land and do all those things. And that all comes much later in our evolutionary process. So why do we tell you all this? Because there is something that connects all of these reactions: our fighting response, our fleeing or running away response, the feelings and memories that we develop. There's something there that is very concerning to us. It makes us develop these feelings and memories, and figuring it out. So it's kind of all these F's: fighting, fleeing, feelings, and figuring it out. And the thing that they all have in common is that they are there to help us to feel safe. They're concerned with protection, with protecting us. They're concerned with protecting our bodies, our brains, the things that we care about and are important. So we have evolved to keep ourselves safe. Now, I want you to notice that little green box in the corner. That is our symbol for protection. And protection is the first building block in order to build resilience in your life. And there are 6 of them. Protection is the first. The first thing you want to do when something overwhelming happens to you, and this is what, your first responders will do, is make sure you're safe. If you got in an accident, they'll put you on the side of the road, put a blanket around you, make sure that you're out of the way of anything that might be more harmful. If somebody hurts your feelings, you want to go and run to someone that you can talk to and help you feel safe again, that you're accepted. So there's all kinds of ways that we as humans try to protect ourselves, physically, emotionally, cognitively. But here's the challenge for how we live today. We are not being chased by lions anymore. We are being chased by things that are much more conceptual and distant and non-physical, but are still threatening to us. So, getting up and having to do public speaking, dealing with a social media troll who just totally insults you and, puts you, on edge, fears about COVID, political conversations that make you feel very threatened because somebody doesn't see it your way. Getting cut off from traffic. Oh my gosh, you almost killed me. Did you realize that you put me in danger when you cut me off in traffic? And all of those things feel to us, or can feel to us, as threatening as those early threats that we evolved to deal with, like the saber-toothed tiger, or the horrible weather, or the challenge of getting enough food or shelter, the warring clans that were around us, whatever. And now that's how we see it. So how does this play out in modern times? So let's say you go to a party. Our brains evolved with these tools to keep us safe. And part of what we use in our brains is this kind of, automatic responses that are working kind of subconsciously, so that every time we meet somebody, there is this kind of activity going on in us. Is this person a friend or a foe? So let's say that there's these three people at a party, and any one of them could be a friend or a foe, right? How do you know? How do you judge that as a functioning person today? So let's take this first example of this stock image of this poor woman who we're going to make kind of scary looking. But how would you react? So let's say you go to the party, you see her from across the room, and you just get an automatic bad feeling. I am not talking to her. I do not have a good sense about her. I don't feel great about it. There's something in my gut that says she's not going to be a good person. Then you might move into your memory feeling brain, and you say, you know why I feel like that? Because I knew her in high school and she was not nice, right? But now let's say that you're at this party and you're supposed to be networking or, meeting new people. And you might override both your automatic gut feeling and your memory of her in high school. And you might say, you know what, I'm networking. Yeah, I feel uncomfortable, but it's probably because I remember her from high school and she wasn't that nice. But, we're not in high school anymore. I'm going to give her a chance, right? So that's how we kind of think through things in our modern life. We kind of have to. We have to put aside those automatic urges, right? So let's go on to see how those kind of green light, red light, danger moments can play out. So you can either go with your gut, that action response, that automatic feeling of, I don't like this person. I like this picture. This guy's just like, I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with these people that are, my gut's telling me this is not a good place to be. And that's the fight, flight, or freeze response, just automatically getting out of there and not dealing with it. Then you have the feelings and the memories, which can, help you to understand why you feel that way, why you have that automatic response. And then finally, you get into your thinking mind and think, well, I think I can override that because I understand where those are coming from. Now, I want to say it's not like you should override everything that you and your gut tells you or your memories tell you. Of course, you need to listen to your gut and you need to listen to your memories. Again, all three are important. But what happens with the thinking part is that you're noticing. You're noticing that, hey, gosh, my heart rate is increasing and I'm getting kind of sweaty palms and I'm feeling just anxious and out of it. And I wonder why. Well, that must be an automatic response to something. And maybe it was triggered by a feeling or a memory. So now you can be aware of it instead of just feeling like I'm just anxious and I don't even know what this feeling is. So that's part of one of our tools that we can use in our modern times that can help us to understand those feelings and how our brain is working. Now let's talk briefly about the freeze response. And I want to just put a gentle trigger warning out there. The freeze response is something that can come up when you are especially traumatized or can lead to moments where you feel especially traumatized. So we won't talk about specific things that can happen, but there are different times when our body might freeze up. And typically it's when we're feeling high levels of danger. And some of the feelings that you might get in your body or experience in those times are, kind of, I couldn't move. I felt like I was stuck. I couldn't think straight. I felt like I was watching myself from really far away. That I'm sure has happened to many of us, even just with things like public speaking, where you freeze up, you feel so in danger that you don't feel like you can even speak. But again, the freeze response, although it is a very helpless feeling, It's another way that evolution gave us to protect ourselves. Now, how does a freeze response protect you? Well, first of all, when you freeze or kind of play dead, the predator might leave you alone, right? We know that from the animal world, like opossums, they play dead and they get left alone. My dog thought he scared an opossum dead and, got up 5 minutes later and left. In a freeze state, as with fight or flight, part of what our body does is by priming us to either fight, flight, or freeze is to increase our tolerance for pain. So sometimes freezing up can make us handle pain better. It can also prevent us from getting into further harm. And again, we look at the animal world. Let's say, think about like your dog playing with the chew toy and they shake it in their mouth, right? Well, if, you were out in the tundra and you were, trying to get away from a bear, and the bear got you and you were fighting with it while it was shaking in its mouth, you might get hurt more. So playing limp or going limp can actually help you to protect yourself. And finally, this is something that that is useful for people who are going through something that's really intolerable. And that is that when you freeze, it can help you to emotionally distance yourself from that so that you can deal with the emotional stuff later, right? And hopefully that's what you get. You get the opportunity to deal with that emotional stuff that came up at that time later on. Unfortunately, we often negatively judge ourselves for having the freeze response. We think, oh, I should have done this, or I was weak at that moment. Oh, there were so many things that I could have said or could have done. And that's not fair to you. You have to realize that your body and its wisdom did what it felt it needed to do automatically in order to protect you. I mean, everything that we've just talked about is about how evolution allowed us to get to where we are by being very protective of us. And it worked. I mean, we run the planet, right? For good or bad, Homo sapiens have emerged out of all of the creatures on this earth to be the ones that kind of rule it. And that's because we have such a strong urge to protect ourselves. And it's, it's other things, but that's a big part of our evolutionary process. So our reactions have evolved to keep us safe. So that takes us to the first building block for resilience, which is protection, right? It's worked, it's helped us. And what we need to do is be consciously aware that we need to be protecting ourselves or putting ourselves in states where we feel protected. It is such a deep need in us, an evolutionarily primitive or ancient need in us that we need to be consciously aware of now. That protection is, if we're not feeling safe, we are going to suffer consequences for that. And so we have to be pursuing that in a very conscious way. And the second thing that we're going to talk about next is about when we realize that we need that element of safety. The second building block is relationship. And relationship is what helps us to go past just needing to put a kind of wall around ourselves and into a state where we can feel safe because of the other people that are around us. And let me show you how that works. So humans evolved to need and thrive in relationship. And why did this happen from an evolutionary perspective? This is an oversimplification, but humans have a long childhood because we started to walk upright and we started to develop these big brains that we carried on these, standing up bodies. We started to be born earlier and, younger and, younger. And so that we don't pop out kind of, like some animals and ready to go off on our own, we need a long time to develop, right? So that makes us more dependent on our parents and other people. And we evolved to not just be dependent on our parents, but on these networks of social connections and alliances. So we built, tribes and clans and neighborhoods and communities and now cities and now kind of this global world that we all exist in. So what's really important is this thing called serve and return. And this is where we learn as children how to connect to another person, to have that interaction and develop. And the way it works is, you're holding your baby. So here's an example of a father holding his child, and the child does something and the father sees it and reacts. And the child sees that reaction and reacts again. And there's this interplay of reaction and positive re-reaction back and reflection back. And we don't ever really lose that need for that. We get taught how to do that as children. And then as adults, that's how we build our connections with each other. That doesn't mean that every time we have an interaction, it's positive and wonderful and affirming of who you are, but it can be that back and forth. I'm going to tell you something, you're going to react, and you're going to tell me something. And as long as we stay in a safe, protected relationship, we are having a relationship. Even if it's not perfect, it doesn't look like, 90s sitcom or something, we are in relationship. As long as we're safe and protected in our own bodies and in that environment, we can have lots of interactions that are back and forth that are really supportive. And what happens when we have those reactions back and forth is that we help to bring our brains and our bodies into something called homeostasis. And that's where all those hormones that made us react in that automatic way, the fight or flight, the thing that makes us like our heart's beating and we feel anxious and we feel like, oh, there's a lot going on. Those hormones get tamped down, is kind of a simple way of putting it, so that our bodies can come back into rest, right? And every time we do that, we train our bodies to be, oh, that happened. Oh, it's okay. Everything's fine. I'm safe. I'm protected, right? And we want to learn how to do that when we're kids. Some of us didn't learn that though. We learned how to be on high alert all the time. But we can learn that now. We have what's called plasticity, brain plasticity, which means that we can learn new things at any time. And today may be a time for anyone listening to learn something new that can help you to deal with those feelings. So here's one way that we train in childhood. We look at this like super warm picture of this mom hugging her child. And what is that child learning? Not just in her brain. She's thinking, I'm safe. She's feeling it in her body. She's feeling safety and protection, which is telling her, I am lovable. I'm safe. I'm worthy of being safe. I'm protected. And my brain is remembering what this feeling feels like. And that's something that we have to tap into. And if we didn't get it in childhood, we have to find things that make us feel that way in adulthood. And those are some of the things we're going to talk about. So when we've looked at how our evolutionary process worked, it really is a gift that we want protection and we want relationship. So those are two of our 6 building blocks of resilience, is protection and relationship. We all need to recognize that we have a need for protection and safety. It's not weakness to need it. It is who we are. It is how we evolved. We want to then be using our thinking mind so that we're aware of our responses and we're trying to see, now, why did I respond to that? What is it that's making me feel unsafe? If I responded in anger, probably there's something going on here that's making me feel unsafe. So a great example, of course, is, being cut off in traffic. You're going to yell at someone or flip them off or something. And that automatic response say, oh, that's because that person made me feel like they were going to hurt me, right? The best way to find inner resources for relationships is by developing that serve and return relationship. Bonded and attached relationships does not mean that they're perfect all the time. It means that you have an opportunity to exchange, to have an exchange that's honest and safe, and continue that. And have that back and forth. And that doesn't mean you're always talking to each other, but it's like when things are going well with each other, we're having this serve and return. And when things are not going well, I am not in fear of my safety or I don't feel like I need to be protected from this person. That's a very foundational way to start a relationship or think about your relationships. And particularly with children, when we do the serve and return, we're building bonded and attached relationships. And finally, our brains are plastic. We can learn all of this at any age. So we're just about ready to wrap it up, but we're just going to talk about a few concepts and help you to write things out for yourself. So what does safety feel like for you? You want to write down how you feel when you feel safe and protected. So think about what your body feels like, what your mind might be thinking, what kind of environment you need or that feels great for you, what persons might be there or not there. So just thinking about generally how you feel when you're feeling safe and protected. So here are some ideas that we've gotten. And you can always pause if you don't want to hear this first and you want to write down your own. Here's some responses we've gotten to this question. I felt more protected by moving to a safer area, maybe a better neighborhood, by getting good locks put on my door. That's made me feel more protected. Trusting my gut, listening to what it is telling me is important. Being attuned to your body and listening to what it is telling you, and then being able to respond and say, I wonder where that's coming from, right? And thinking through that. Calling a friend or family member so they know what's happening with me. Simple stuff. I mean, I like this one. A warm blanket and a hot cup of tea makes me feel safe and protected, right? And that's more of an emotional. I feel, kind of emotionally safe and protected. Eating well, thinking about my health. Prevention is protection, right? And things like your health and how you eat and what you put in your body. Setting boundaries with others about what I feel comfortable doing or not doing. That's really important. Being able to know, first of all, what kind of boundaries do I need? And then being able to communicate that in a way to people that continues that serve and return. This is not, me cutting off the relationship. This is me telling you what I need in order to feel comfortable. Seeking out good information, not falling for everything I read or see online. That's very important that we live in an age of disinformation and confusion. And so part of being protected is being informed about what's happening and finding, ways to get good information. Prayer, meditation, but prayer is an excellent one. People feel spiritually safer if they pray. So whatever works for you. So I want to touch on something before we wrap it up that I think is really important. There are systemic causes of chronic stress and fear of danger in our society. Things that separate us, like race or immigration status, economic status, LGBTQ status, things like that make us feel separated and unsafe just in a general way out in the world, in society. And this puts extra burdens on some to find ways to feel safe. So that's where it's very important to create healthy boundaries around yourself, understanding what feels right for you and not being pressured into doing things before you feel ready to. But also, challenging yourself. It doesn't mean you put a fence around you and never go out of your house, although that's kind of how we live now. But then we want to talk about belonging, which is actually our fifth building block of resilience. So we're going to skip ahead to some. So we've talked about protection, relationship, and now belonging. Belonging is that need to feel connected to a group that accepts us. Someone who has your back, or some people that have your back. So connecting with those whose experiences are similar is a very good way to feel more protected and to feel like you can handle the emotions that come with that fear of not being safe. And joining groups to discuss and heal is also just another way. So here's another challenge. Write down the places you feel safe and the people with whom you feel safe. And name one or two boundaries that you have that you feel are reasonable boundaries. Okay, the next and second to last slide here is you want to think about the final building block of resilience, which is storytelling. When we tell our stories, we do something really interesting in our brains, and that is we organize what happened to us. And this is part of that evolutionary pattern. We observe what we did automatically. We think about how that emotion felt and we connect it to that memory. And then we think through it and create a story. So the lion was after me and immediately I started running and I turned around and I saw it was so close to me and I ran up the rock and then he was stuck there and I threw a rock at him and then I laughed and then I got away. And now I'm telling you this story by the campfire, right? That's a healing process because now that person has taken all of those emotions and that automatic response and ordered it in their brain into something that made sense to them. And from what I understand, that process can help put memories and experiences into different parts of our brain that helps us to process it better. And then also you're sharing your story with somebody else that can then learn from you and say, okay, next time that lion goes after me, I'm going to run up that hill and I'm going to throw those rocks at him until he goes away, right? So do you have places and people you can share your story with? And remember that writing down your story is just as valuable, even if you don't have a whole audience, you can't do your TED Talk, or you don't have the dinner party with the friends around or whatever. You can always write it down. But every chance you get to tell a story and to hear other stories, it's really important. It's just part of our humanity. All right, so to wrap it up, here's what we learned. Our stress response is related to our primitive past, and that is that we want to stay safe. We need to be protected. And today we have emotional, social, and systemic harms that are everywhere and require us to use all three parts of our brain in order to really understand what's going on and to help us to get into balance, right? So the building blocks for resilience are relationships and belonging. And we also talked about storytelling. Those help us to recognize safety and search for safety in our environments, interactions, and how we care for ourselves. And as adults, we seek to use our thinking brain to help us assess danger and consciously provide the elements we need to feel protected. That's just another way of saying that as an adult, you need to figure out what you need to feel safe and you need to implement them for yourself. However, for our children, we have to do it for them. Remember, they are dependent on us to provide protection and safety. And if that's not happening in their environment, we need to figure out how to do that. It's really important for how we develop as adults. If you'd like to get a copy of the 6 building blocks for resilience, you can visit us at bouncebackgeneration.org. There'll be a pop-up and you can just type in your email address and we will send you a PDF. Or you can go to bbgtv.org where there's videos and other tools that you can use. Again, promising some sources and resources. You could pause and look at this. There's information about the stress response, the long effects of trauma in childhood, how dopamine works. There is also a 5-minute mindfulness video that you'll find on our YouTube channel. Just look for Jennifer's 5-minute mindfulness moment. That will help with calming some of those reactions down and helping our brains to get used to noticing things. In addition, there's the book Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst by Robert Sapolsky. I recommend everything from him. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. It's a great, fun read. And one of the best resources for understanding trauma and how it affects us from childhood to adulthood, particularly in childhood, is the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, or on the developing child. And that's at developingchild.harvard.edu. And finally, just want to say thank you. We appreciate you. We're glad you're here. If you want to watch more, go and follow us on BBGTV on YouTube. We have an Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts. And we'd love to have you part of our community and our family. Please join us. And this is just a little information about who we are, and we'll see you next time. We do community learning opportunities once a month, so make sure to follow us so we can share our next one with you.